of Kids Church at Home. I'm so glad that you are here with me to explore and to have some fun and get creative this week. We're in Lent still, and so we're still exploring different ways of having a spiritual practice. So we'll get to that with our craft. But we also have a story about anger. Before we jump into everything, our special shout out this week goes to Gabby and Gianluca and to Callie and Jackson. Thank you for being part of this community online and through these videos. So let's get to our story. So there's a story in the Bible that tells about a time when Jesus got really angry. We like to think of Jesus as a healer and somebody who ministered and took care of others. But in taking care of others, sometimes we see that people are treated unjustly. And Jesus, like us, got angry at how unfair things were. Now, Jesus' anger wasn't so much about how things were unfair for him, but that they were unfair for others. And he was so upset that it was unfair for others. We have a story about how he expressed his anger by turning over tables and driving out the people who were treating others unfairly. We don't often think about Jesus as somebody who got angry. But it does go to show us something about anger, doesn't it? That anger itself is not a bad thing. Anger sometimes comes from a real place of love and of care. But what's important is what we do with that anger. Can you befriend your anger? Can you use your anger to make good? That's the question. Well, I have a story called On's Anger. And On experiences anger. And at first, anger has control over On and his behavior until On learns to be friends with his anger. On's Anger by Gail Silver and Christiane Krummer. On was in the living room building a tower. The tallest tower he'd ever built. His grandfather was in the kitchen, making dinner. On, grandfather called out. Dinner is ready. On added a yellow brick and smiled. The tower was almost as tall as he was. Now the red one, On whispered, placing a red block on the very top. Grandfather came in from the kitchen. What a wonderful tower! It's not done yet, On told him. Come sit down, grandfather said. You can play more after we eat. He set the plates on the table and returned to On, who was balancing a green block on top of the red one. Put your blocks down now, said grandfather. Dinner is getting cold. On wanted to keep playing. He opened his mouth to speak, but his bottom lip quivered, and the words wouldn't come. On's eyes filled with tears, and he started to cry. Grandfather tried to put his arm around On, but On pushed him away, knocking the tower over and sending the blocks flying. Go away! I hate you! On shouted. You're upset, said grandfather. Please go to your room and sit with your anger. I'll come in when you're calm and able to talk. On ran to his room, leapt onto his bed. His cries grew so strong he could feel them all the way down to his belly. How do I sit with my anger? He wondered. I'm so angry, angry, angry. Finally, said a voice, I was hoping you would notice me. On lifted his head and came face to face with a hairy red creature. Who are you? Asked On. And how did you get into my room? I'm your anger, said the creature. You brought me here. My anger? Anger nodded. Did grandfather see you come in? I'm not supposed to talk with strangers. Don't worry, On, I'm not a stranger. I'm the part of you that comes out when things don't go your way. I'm right here every time you get angry. I know you feel scared when I'm around. I can make you cry and want to hit things. I can even make you say mean things to the people you love. On's anger started to turn the knob of the bedroom door. Come on, he said, I'll show you. On was tempted, but Grandfather had said to stay in the room. Wait, On called. Maybe we can do something in here. On's anger turned and extended his hairy hand. I know just the thing, he said. On took his anger's hand, and together they danced all around the room. They raised their arms overhead and spun wide circles. They used their breath to make sounds like a strong, howly wind. They got down on their knees and pounded the ground with their hands. It sounded like they were playing drums on the earth, and On liked that. Finally, they were exhausted and ready to be still. On and his anger sat together silently. They sat. They breathed in. They breathed out. And they sat some more. I don't like to say mean things to people, said On, but sometimes I can't help it. I can help you, said his anger. How can you help? I thought you were the one who was making me do these things in the first place. That's true, but I'm also your friend. Whenever you feel angry, you should come sit with me. After we spend some time together, you might feel better. Spending time with you is kind of fun, On said. Do you want to stay for dinner? I think I'll be gone before dinner, said his anger. Are you sure? Said On. We're having ice cream for dessert. On's anger smiled, and On smiled back. On was tired. He took a deep breath and let out a little sigh. And when he did, his anger became smaller. On and his anger continued to breathe together. With each in-breath, On's anger got a little bit smaller, and with each out-breath, On felt a little bit better. On heard a gentle tapping on his bedroom door. It was Grandfather. Grandfather and On sat together. I'm sorry I didn't listen, said On. I was really angry. I wanted to keep playing. Grandfather took On in his arms. Thank you for your kind words, he said. I sat with my anger like you asked, On said, but we didn't just sit. We danced and we played too. Do you want to meet him? On looked up, but his anger was gone. Grandfather, do you know what happened? I think I do, said Grandfather. You took good care of your anger, and it went away. That's right, said On. How did you know? When I was a little boy, I met with my anger too. Really? Was it because of blocks? No, laughed Grandfather. There were no blocks. Just frogs, a lily pond, and a sun that wouldn't set. Come, let's eat dinner, and I'll tell you my story. Well, I wonder, what do you think of On's experience? Do you experience anger like that sometimes? Where it seems like anger is so big, there's nothing you can do to make it better? I wonder, what does On learn about anger? Is that something you can do with your anger? I wonder what it would mean to be friends with your anger when your anger comes to visit next time. So here we are in Lent, and we've been doing a series of different spiritual practices through Lent as our activity. So these are different ways to create space to connect with God. And sometimes we create that space when we're feeling good and we're feeling at peace and we're feeling joy. But it's just as important to have these tools to be able to connect with God when we're feeling bad or sad or even angry. Our spiritual practices, these things that we can do to create space with God, are just as important to help us be friends with all of our feelings, including anger. So this week, we're going to create a labyrinth. Now I have two versions of labyrinth shapes here. One is a spiral, and it has a little loop at the end. And one is a more traditional labyrinth that goes around and hoops around. And you'll notice with a labyrinth is it looks a little bit like a maze, except you can't get lost. And labyrinths have been used for centuries as people would walk the shape. And while they walk, they create space to explore their inner selves with God. So we're going to create a labyrinth, but rather than be able to walk it, we're going to make one with texture so we can use our fingers to walk the labyrinth. So you could use your finger just to trace the line, but we're going to glue some texture onto these lines so as you run your finger, you can feel the touch and the bumps and the texture of the path. So if you were not able to pick up a package or a supply package this week at church, here's what you need to get to do this activity with us. You will need a piece of cardboard, something that's nice and steady, because when we start to glue the texture onto our labyrinth, we want something solid. So I have a pizza box here, a cereal box would be fine too. You then want to get a piece of white paper and you're going to draw a labyrinth shape on it. Now, if you don't have one like this, you can find them online. And if you can't find them online, the simplest thing to do is to get a plate and to start the spiral around the plate. And when you get about here, you're going to lift up your plate and continue your spiral all the way to the center of your page. That is the most simple labyrinth that you can do, and you don't need to print or trace or anything. You just draw a spiral. But if you've got other tools or other resources, you can make a more complex labyrinth. Then we're going to need some glue. Now I'm going to use some white glue today. You can also use a hot glue gun if you are good with a hot glue gun or have somebody who can help you. A hot glue gun is going to glue things faster, and so it will dry faster, and maybe your texture won't go all over the place. A white glue is going to require more patience to let things dry properly, but that's what I'm going to use today. And finally, to create our texture, I am going to use some beans, some nice, I think they're called navy beans even though they're white. I've never understood that. But I'm going to use some beans. You can also use dried pasta or beads or anything else that you find in your house that's, about the size maybe of your pinky finger and has a nice texture that you can use. So now that we have all of our stuff together, let's get into this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to choose one of our designs and we're going to glue it onto our cardboard backing. So I think I'm going to go with this loopy design today, and I'm going to put some glue on my cardboard and get this stuck on. Okay, I have my design glued onto my cardboard, and now, holding my beans away from the cats, I'm going to take my glue and I'm going to start to draw a bead of glue along the line of my design. So I've just done a little bit, and then I'm going to put whatever I'm using for texture onto that bead of glue. Why, thank you. You like the beans. Yes. Okay. There we go. Nope, that's not. Okay. There we go. putting my beans right up against each other. You can see they're tight up against each other. They're filling the glue, and I'm going to let them dry like that. That will create the texture. Next, I'm going to do another bead of glue along the line. Yes. And keeping that glue away from the cat, I'm going to fill it up with the next set of beads, and then I'm going to just keep on going like that until I've filled the whole design. And this part in itself can be a little bit of a meditative kind of process, as you just quietly do one bead at a time, nice and slow. It's not a race, although the cats like to help. Hi. Yeah. All right, well there I've started, and now I'm going to finish up the rest, and then we'll come back when it's all filled in. Okay, well, I'm finishing up the last little bit of my labyrinth. I'm curious, has this been an exercise of patience for you? Has it taken a long time to get all the pieces right? I hope you weren't trying for too perfect of beans. Some of them are going to be a little bit crooked. Some of them are going to slip around a little bit. That's okay. That's part of the process. Here we go. We're going to put our last bean in place. And there it is. Well, friends, here is my finished labyrinth with all the beans. I wonder how many beans are in my labyrinth. Maybe one of these days I will count them as I move my fingers around. So there's lots of ways for you to use your labyrinth. The easiest way is to take your finger when it's dry and just move it along the beads. What does that feel like under your finger? And maybe while you're moving your finger around the labyrinth, you might think of a question that's been on your mind. Or maybe you might explore some feelings that you have been feeling lately. And just take the time as you go around to bring those feelings or those thoughts to mind and to ask God to hear you and to be with you and maybe to listen. And if you're having trouble figuring out what is it that I'm thinking or feeling right now, another thing to do would be to count as you go along. Count the bumps and see if in counting the bumps with your finger, whether or not you can feel some peace and some quiet. You can almost think of it as if as you go along this path, this is the path you are walking with God. And God meets you along and walks with you along the whole path as you do this labyrinth with your finger. There's so many wonderful ways to be able to imagine and to use a simple texture and a simple rhythm and a simple path to create space. Space to listen to God, space to listen to your heart, space to find peace and calm, space to allow your feelings to be your feelings and to make friends with them. Well, these beans keep slipping and sliding because my glue is not yet dry. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to let my glue dry, and then maybe later this afternoon, I will be able to use my labyrinth for the first time with my finger. I look forward to being able to do that. And I hope that you enjoy the outcome, even if the process was frustrating with all these little bits and slippy, slidey glue. I hope that when it's dry, you can enjoy the feel under your fingers and take that time with what you have created. Using that patience and that time, it was worth creating something special. Well, my friends, until the next time we meet, may there be love in your heart to give. May there be joy in your heart to share. And may there be strength in your heart to lift others up. Bye!